One of the largest risk factors for the development of prostate cancer in a man's life is family history. However, just because a man has a family history of prostate cancer doesn't mean he's doomed to having a prostate cancer diagnosis at some stage in his life. In today's video, I wanted to highlight for you 5 common foods which you can consume on a regular basis to try to reduce your lifetime risk of prostate cancer. Now, I know whenever people talk about diet, it can be a really emotive subject and people are hell-bent on one particular pathway. What I wanted to do in today's video really is to try to stick to the science. Although it's not complete, I wanted to highlight for you some foods that we do know that can be associated with a prostate healthy lifestyle. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to highlight for you a food group that perhaps we should reduce to try and reduce our lifetime risk of developing prostate cancer. Hi, my name is Dr. Charles Chabert. I'm a urologist and director of the prostate clinic located on the Gold Coast in Australia. As always, if you get benefit from the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and if you have comments or ideas that you'd like to share, please leave them in the comments section down below. Okay, let's get into it. So food number 1 are tomatoes. And the reason why tomatoes can be protective or healthy for your prostate is because they contain high concentrations of a chemical called lycopenes. Now, lycopenes are part of the carotenoid family. They are the chemical within tomatoes that give it its red color. So in other foods that are very red, so for example, things like pink grapefruit or watermelon, they also contain a high concentration of lycopenes. Now, lycopenes have different properties that are thought to be effective in reducing the risk of developing prostate cancer. So number 1, they have powerful antioxidant effects. And it's these antioxidant effects that are thought to prevent or reduce the possibility of cell damage. And one of the ways that we think prostate cancer and many other cancers can evolve is through the propagation, the ongoing development of a damaged cell. We've got billions of cells in our bodies, and these cells multiply and replicate every single day. If there are damage to these cells, then that damage can be continued in the replication process. And it's thought that this propagation of allowing damaged cells to multiply and replicate is the cornerstone of how we develop cancer. So the antioxidant effects in lycopenes are thought to have a significant effect in reducing that risk. Now, it's also thought that lycopenes can potentially reduce a PSA level. And beyond being protective from a prostate point of view, they also have beneficial effects from a cardiovascular point of view. And lycopenes can reduce LDL cholesterol levels. So LDL is the bad cholesterol. So it can reduce that, which can have the benefit of being heart healthy, heart protective also. There is some data as well with lycopenes that it can help protect the skin and it can help maintain stronger bones, which is certainly very important as we progress through life, as changes in bone mineral density are not uncommon as we age. Food group number 2 is cruciferous vegetables. Now that includes vegetables like broccoli, like cauliflower, like kale, Brussels sprouts. Cruciferous vegetables contain high concentrations of sulfur-containing compounds. These sulfur-containing compounds are called glucosinolates. A bit of a mouthful, but these compounds, which actually become more active and more bioavailable following chewing or cutting of these vegetables, these compounds actually can be protective because of different mechanisms. These sulfur-containing compounds are known to be both anti-inflammatory and also have an antioxidant effect. In fact, a meta-analysis, which basically is a review article looking at many studies looking or focusing on a particular aspect, a meta-analysis demonstrated that there was an inverse correlation between the consumption of cruciferous vegetables and the probability of developing prostate cancer. In essence, the more you ate of broccoli, cauliflower, kale, etc., the lower the probability of developing a prostate cancer diagnosis was. The third food group is the consumption of nuts, in particular tree nuts, such as nuts like walnuts. And again, through their anti-inflammatory and antioxidative properties, the consumption of nuts has actually been demonstrated to reduce the probability of a prostate cancer diagnosis. In fact, in 2020, there was a study that demonstrated the higher the consumption of tree nuts, the lower the risk of developing prostate cancer was. In addition to that, there was a Harvard prospective control study, and in this study, they found that the consumption of 5 servings of tree nuts per week was, when compared to consuming 1 serving of tree nuts per month, was associated with a significantly lower mortality rate. The Harvard prospective control study looked at a population of men pursuant to a prostate cancer diagnosis. In one cohort, they had at least 5 servings of tree nuts per week, and in the other cohort, the consumption was less than 1 serving per month. What they actually found was that the probability of progression of prostate cancer was lower in the group who consumed tree nuts on a more regular basis. And 1 serving of tree nuts was defined as 30 grams of nuts, which really is a small handful of nuts. Previous studies looking into the protective nature of the consumption of tree nuts also found that it could reduce the relative risk of developing any cancer, and certainly that data has been borne across when we look at the breast cancer population as well. The fourth food group is pomegranate juice. Now, pomegranate juice has been shown to contain high concentrations of polyphenols. Polyphenols are the chemical that's also found in very high concentrations in virgin olive oil. Now, polyphenols are very good, very healthy for us because they have been shown to be both antioxidant and also anti-inflammatory. And it is the consumption of polyphenols that has been shown to be protective from a prostate cancer risk perspective. It is the reduction in something called oxidative stress, which basically results in cell damage. And so if we can reduce the probability of cell damage, we reduce the potential trigger for cancer development. There's a technical term called apoptosis, which basically means programmed cell death, i.e. the destruction, the death of a particular cell. And there is some data, lab-based data, that demonstrates that the consumption of polyphenols in pomegranate juice can stimulate apoptosis of prostate cancer cells, so it can prevent the propagation, again, of that particular line of mutation or abnormal cell development. The final group I wanted to talk about today was green tea. Now, green tea contains a chemical called catechins. And the catechins, again, are powerful antioxidants. There was a landmark study all the way back in 2012 that looked at men who did have an established diagnosis of prostate cancer, and they were awaiting surgery for the treatment of that localized disease. And when they compared groups that actually consumed more cups of green tea compared to those that didn't, they found that there was a significant drop in PSA levels in the cohort that consumed green tea. Okay, so those are the 5 foods that we should try to consume on a more regular basis if we are interested in being both heart healthy and also trying to look after our prostate as we progress through life. So what should we look to avoid? Well, one of the compounds we should avoid is red meat, and in particular, red meat cooked at high temperature, and the other is the consumption of processed meat. Now, if we look at barbecue meat, which is really cooking red meat at high temperatures, the challenge with this is it leads to the development of a couple of compounds that have been shown to be carcinogenic, i.e. promote the development of new abnormal growths within the body. These compounds are HCAs, which stands for heterocyclic amines, and the other one are PAHs. Now that stands for, all of this is a mouthful, and that stands for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Both of these chemicals, as I have said, have been associated with an increased risk of cancer. In essence, these chemicals come from the char on barbecued meat. Now, this is where the whole discussion gets quite emotive, because the majority of us have grown up enjoying summertime barbecues, whether that's the consumption of chicken or beef or pork on the barbecue. I know in my experience, I had a father that came from Louisiana, and so barbecue was a regular staple on our Sunday lunch menu. That being said, this is what the evidence is highlighting for us. The other thing to be aware of is that the World Health Organization back in 2015 issued a landmark statement, really, where they put processed meat. So that's anything from deli meats, salami, hamburgers, sausages, bacon. They put that into a category of a grade 1 carcinogen. Basically, that puts it in the same category as smoking cigarettes. Now, they tried to quantify this to some degree, and their comment was that the consumption of around 50 grams, so that's the equivalent of around 2 rashers of bacon, that if we consume 2 rashers of bacon per day, the relative risk of colon cancer increased by around 18%. 18% from 2 rashers of bacon on a daily basis. If we look at the consumption of, technical term here, of unprocessed mammalian muscle. So that basically means that if you were to have a steak or a pork chop or a lamb chop, for example, if you were to consume that, they put that into a group 2A, which meant that the evidence was not sufficiently strong to say that it was causal and associated with an increased risk of cancer development, but they thought that it could, and that there was a potential link. So that's not concrete, but that's where the advice and the position statement, if you like, is from the World Health Organization. Look, I hope you found that beneficial. I hope it wasn't too controversial for you. As always, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you'd like to know more about your prostate and what we can do with it, please have a look at this video or potentially this video here. Until the next time, take care of your prostate.